So we are going to look at Ben Shapiro defending Israel in the Breakfast Club over there. I haven't seen it yet. Let's look at it.
Interesting. I want to go back to your book in a second, but I'm glad you said that because you don't think what's happening in Gaza is a genocide.
Correct.
Okay, but the world's leading association of genocide scholars has declared.
This should be clarified. For my own opinion, genocide may have happened in Gaza. We just don't know who committed it. It is very unlikely that the Israeli government will be convicted of genocide. But I have no doubt, looking at the right-wing tendencies of young Israelis, about 70% of them subscribing to the Likud charter, which says there will only be Israeli sovereignty from the river to the sea, thereby necessitating ethnic cleansing, genocide, or apartheid, right? I have no doubt that some of those people in the IDF have done acts of genocide. Just like Srebrenica, Serbia was not convicted as a state of genocide. They concluded that Srebrenica was an isolated case of genocide, not responsible by the state of Serbia.
That Israel is committing genocide in Gaza based off the pure definition of...
Well, it's not actually, if you read their actual study, it's not based on the quote-unquote pure definition of genocide. They don't actually even define genocide in the document. And they basically went out to their membership, but they didn't go out to the entire membership. They went out to a generic membership. It is very easy to join the International Association of Genocide Scholars. In fact, there were several people yesterday who just signed up and were immediately admitted, even though they have no actual background.
You have to be like a teacher or some kind of... You have to be... It's not a very high bar, but it's high enough to where your opinion matters, right? It definitely matters if you're in this association, but they did only reach about 20%, might have been 30% of their membership with this ruling, and some of them complained that there was no pre-debate that occurred, because maybe they could have clarified some of the stuff I was talking about earlier, because this is a very hard question to answer. Now, a lot of people, like maybe Charlemagne, definitely Kyle Kalinske, go to the word genocide as if they're looking up synonyms of the word bad or the word human suffering in the thesaurus, as if genocide is a good way of describing every human atrocity, right? Genocide isn't necessarily the worst human atrocity, right? I could say Putin kidnapping 35,000 Ukrainian kids and indoctrinating them away from their parents forever in Russian culture. That is genocide. No kids died in that process. In fact, they were less likely. Putin saved children through genocide. Imagine that. Now, that's just that isolated case of genocide. He's done genocide where he's killed plenty of Ukrainians in Mariupol, etc. But you can see how genocide is a specific word to describe a specific dynamic. Like, you cannot say that Srebrenica was worse than the Iraq War. The Srebrenica just had a very specific dynamic that we've decided to call genocide. The Iraq War had much, much, much worse implications, and poor incentives and poor intent. So, just something to keep in mind when you use the word genocide.
In genocide, the question is not whether some sort of coterie of people who call themselves experts in an issue are quote-unquote experts on the issue. The question is whether the definition is met. The definition of genocide is not met in Gaza by any stretch of the imagination, and you can cite to me, a group that I hadn't heard of until 2 seconds ago, and nobody had heard of until 2 seconds ago, that voted in a particular way. That doesn't make a difference definitionally.
Again, this is so fucking weaselly. He knows how fucking weaselly it is. All you have to do this yourself, right? Type in list of international organizations that say Israel is committing a genocide. Now, from my perspective, just the things Charlemagne referenced alone, that's good enough for me. All of the...
Why? If you're gonna accuse the most specific crime, the hardest to convict crime of which no state has been convicted of it, it's so hard to be convicted of it, right? Even the UN essentially acquitted any sort of genocide from happening in Darfur. 300,000 people died there. Probably much better evidence for genocide there than there is in Gaza, to be honest, if you've looked at the case. If you're going to go for this very high bar, you might as well research it. And if you actually read any of these, then it becomes very clear that most of the reports make an outline for genocide. They make an argument for plausible genocide. They cannot prove genocide. What do I mean by that? The ICJ has ruled that some people mistakenly think that they ruled that genocide has plausibly taken place, but actually they just ruled that that the rights being claimed in South Africa's case are plausible. Basically, that means that it wasn't the equivalent of a frivolous lawsuit. So there was the basic ingredients there. There was the outcomes that could have been a result of genocide, and that's what most of these reports are. They're outcome based. To prove genocide, we need human intelligence and signal intelligence, and we don't have that. Inter-IDF communications. Your argument for genocide should only, as an afterthought, include the things that Kyle Kalinske will only talk about, like death and starvation. That is not how you prove genocide. It's not an outcome-based deal here. Because you have to prove that the only possible explanation is an intent to destroy in whole or in part. Otherwise, you can't convict. And that's why the whole state conviction is very unlikely, but very isolated incidents that will probably go unnoticed, unfortunately, are very likely, if not for sure, have happened.
Genocide scholars, and I'm sure that the thing he said about, people signed up yesterday for that. No, that's fucking Hasbara Zionist bullshit lies to try to obfuscate from the fact that this group is correct. But it's 86% of genocide experts said this is a genocide. They voted on it. That's what they said, 86%. But if you don't want to believe that,
actually, let me pull up the B'Tselem report, because I think it's a good example of bad faith here. Okay, so let's look at killing and causing serious bodily harm and mental harm. So this is the second part of their argument. First part is statements by the IDF and people in the Israeli government that can be perceived as genocidal. Anything most, that's just BS. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I don't hold religious statements from like Hamas that are like fundamentalist like prophecies that exist in their charter to say that they're genocidal. The evidence has to be much more concrete than that, and the intent can be bolstered by statements, but you have to follow that up with intermilitary communications. Otherwise, you're just going off of hearsay, and you're convicting someone of a very specific crime without very specific evidence, which is not a good idea. So it says, on July 2025, more than 58,000 people have been killed. Study published estimated that the first 12 months got life expectancy dropped by 50% to 40 years, a loss of 35 years. So this is basically describing the death toll right here. This is very outcome-based. If we look at their commentary on that, these figures are the direct outcome of Israel's chosen open fire policy, which systematically violates fundamental principles of international law, such as distinction and proportionality. Israel has adopted a policy that permits unprecedented levels of harm to uninvolved civilians when striking at what it considers military targets. Israel has used extensive technology tools to generate and criminalize targets and has permitted attacks to be carried out based on the discretion of low-ranking soldiers and commanders in the field. These practices enable the military to increase frequency of strikes and reduce risk to soldiers. So this paragraph right here completely invalidates any kind of argument they might have made. And that this paragraph, if it's true, means that there is no genocide. Because it acknowledges that they're striking what they consider to be military targets. Remember, genocide is not a synonym for bad. What Israel's done in Gaza is worse than many genocides. The starvation campaign alone it can be used as evidence, probably, to put a lot of those people in jail. So, like, but this, if you want to be semantic about it, which this whole video is semantic, I don't really care about any of this. because really all that matters is the outcome. That's my whole point. The death count's what matters, not these silly little words. It's striking what it considers to be military targets. They've just loosened their rules of engagement. So this is very unenforceable. We don't know what proper rules of engagement are. We just have to follow distinction, proportionality, and feasible precaution. You can never, ever prove that the IDF is systematically making non-proportional or non-distinct actions. You can say that they aren't being doing as much precaution as they might need to. But distinction and proportionality are very hard to prove, and even if you did, it wouldn't mean genocide. It would, and you'd have to prove intent there as well. It can't just be a mistake. It can't just be laziness. The fact of the matter is, they're prioritizing military targets, and they have killed many military targets. To act like they're ignoring, just completely turning a blind eye to any kind of militant activity and just like going after civilians is silly. Because we do know that they've killed many high-level Hamas people and thousands of Hamas militants. It was much less than they initially claimed. Their kill ratio is probably about five civilians per one militant, which makes sense. The rules of engagement that they've enacted are highly immoral. Like the Where's Daddy campaign, killing 100 civilians for one Hamas militant, all of the hospital raids, right? I tend to believe that Israel is operating based on some grains of truth here.
Which you should want to believe that. Type in list of international organizations that say Israel is committing a genocide. And here's just some of them. Amnesty International. In December 2024, they said that. Human Rights Watch, same thing, December 2024.
It was way too early to be making any of those claims. I think it's absurd that people were saying genocide in 2024. After 2025, you have a little bit more leniency. I don't really care if people call it that now because the killing there is absurd. The starvation campaign is one of the things that you cannot deny.
Doctors Without Borders, the International Court of Justice, UN Special Committee.
The ICJ just did the lowest level of clearance here. They haven't made a specific ruling yet.
International Association of Genocide Scholars, B'Tselem, which is a human rights group, the top Israeli human rights group. Physicians for Human Rights Israel, another Israeli group of doctors that say that's what it is. Oxfam, the Norwegian Refugee Council. You have all these different groups that say, look, that's what this is. And at this point...
Did he just say the ICJ ruled genocide? I mean, I literally just looked at it. Like, did I miss something? No, they have not. That would be breaking history. First state ever to be convicted of genocide by the ICJ.
Honestly, I think you're dishonest if you say it's not a genocide. I think it's just flat out dishonest because there's so much evidence. You would only need to follow what's going on. Pick any.
I agree with that. What do you mean it's not a genocide? I think the rationale for genocide is quite strong and plausible. The rationale that genocide has taken place in Gaza Strip is very strong, very plausible. The idea that we can prove any of this is silly, especially for a state-level conviction from the ICJ. At best, we can maybe get some members of the IDF. But you're going to need some intelligence here. You can't just go off of numbers like the B'Tselem report does and like the Amnesty International report does and all the other reports I looked at.
Any given week throughout the course of this genocide, just follow the news of what's happening on the ground for 1 week, and you'll come away with that. If you're honest, you'll come away with that take. But he's not honest. He's playing for a team, and he's a professional liar and obfuscator. That's what he is.
What is a genocide to you?
A genocide is the attempt to forcibly destroy an entire population.
That is not the actual definition of genocide.
With intent, you must have the intent to destroy a population, a people, an ethnicity, a religion, whatever, a race in whole or in part, and there's many ways you can do that. by there's 5 ways listed there, but you can either do it by killing them in a variety of ways, is restricting their repopulation, or you can deport their kids, like Putin has done, into another group, and that is specifically listed as the one statute, part of the genocide statute that does not involve death.
Now, I think that's effectively what Israel is trying to do to the Palestinians in Gaza, but that's not the actual definition of genocide. If you go to the actual definition of genocide, it is...
Well, you just open the floodgates for all the stupid arguments people usually make, and you make them correct. If you think that Israel's trying their best to kill all Gazans right now, that's obviously a stupid argument. They could do that with the plausible deniability of still targeting Hamas. They could have 1 million Gazans dead right now, and still have plausible deniability, but they don't. But they still drop leaflets. They still have made phone calls. They at least go through the work of making the facade that they are following international law. That's what I've come away with. But of course, they do not always follow international law, as any warring parties typically do not. There has never been a war that has been legal.
The intentional destruction, in whole or in part, of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. That's what it is. That's the definition. And for sure, you're hitting that definition. They're openly saying it. The list of comments from top Israeli government politicians and military officials, they were saying, Palestinians are human animals and they'll be treated as such. They're cockroaches. They're lower than cockroaches.
That's meaningless. In the Bosnian genocide, where the Bosnian Serbs, genocide for like 3 years until Srebrenica happened, ethnically cleansed the Croatians, Bosniaks, right? They had, at the beginning of that, they had a written document. One of the Serbian documents was called Karadžić's 6 Objectives. And it was these 6 objectives to essentially ethnically cleanse Bosnia and create a greater Serbia, I believe. And they basically admitted that they were going to do ethnic engineering there. Now, and that wasn't evidence enough for genocide. Because what you need, you could have Benjamin Netanyahu go tomorrow say, we are doing a genocide. You could literally have that. That does not prove genocide. These phrases add to an argument to make a court more likely to accept it. They do not prove anything. Because for genocide, you need actual military plans, military communications. That's where the intent comes from. And you have to see the intent in the military plans. And then those, would have to be attempted to be executed, right?
Approaches. They've openly dreamt about nuking them, thinking that would be a good idea. You had top officials saying we're going to cut off all food, fuel, water, and electricity going to the Palestinians, admitting we're going to do collective punishment for the actions of Hamas. By the way, there were only 30 or 40,000 Hamas members in Gaza, and when they said we're going to cut off all food, fuel, water, and electricity to all of Gaza, they were saying we're going to do that for over 2 million people. So punish over 2 million for the crimes of 30.
Collective punishment is distinct from genocide. If you want to argue that there's been collective punishment in Gaza, that also needs its own kind of proof. I think the highest war crime you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt is the starvation campaign, using starvation as a weapon of war. This is non-negotiable. Like, they clearly did this. Then next in line would be their very loose rules of engagement that, without a doubt, violated rules of war, as they're listed, I believe, in Article 51 or something. And 57. So, what was he saying again? I forgot what he was saying. Collective punishment. You might be able to prove collective punishment, because what are we doing there? We are punishing the Palestinian people, so there has to be intent to still destroy the Palestinian people based on what Hamas did. All right, so that becomes the equivalent of genocide. You're just changing out. You're essentially changing out the ethnicity or religion part for group association, or where you happen to live at the time October 7th happened. You happen to live in Gaza, so you're blamed for that. So that's the same high bar, really. It's a different crime. Same high bar you have to clear for genocide. I used to think it was like a lower bar, but I re-looked at it, and it seems like it's still a very high bar. I don't know how courts typically litigate on that specific charge, or if it even is a charge that they use.
40,000. That's what they said. And so there is no denying that that's what's going on. The intentional destruction, and we know that too, because they're talking about they've killed all. The actual number is probably at least 300,000, but they want to kill as many as they can, and then ethnic cleanse the rest.
That's from a BS report that he covered on his video a few months ago, and covered on his YouTube channel a few months ago, where a guy was making a map of Gaza, and he made a mistake with one of the population numbers, and it led a lot of people to think that the IDF estimations for Gaza's population was 300,000 less than it was in the war's beginning, and then he fixed it. It turns out if you do the math, everything lines up, and about less than 100,000 people have died. It's probably 60,000 plus 20,000 under the rubble. Add another 10,000 for mistakes in the Gaza Health Ministry. So, but his number is not correct.
Send them to whether it's Libya, or they've been in negotiations with different governments to try to send them there, and then build the fucking Riviera, build Trump hotels and casinos on the beach. I mean, I've never seen a more textbook case of genocide. It's the most obvious thing I've ever seen in my life. They call Palestinians Amalek. Amalek is a story in the Bible where they say you even need to slay the women and the children of Amalek, the enemy. Like, show no mercy.
Again, this is the silly, religious claim, that you cannot. You just don't understand religious people. Like, when Hamas uses those prophecies in their charter, I know, to some person just looking in, that you'd say, oh, that's genocide. I know that they're just saying that as some kind of signatory of broader struggle as a group. And the same thing with Amalek. It doesn't mean anything. Again, Amalek could be the synonym for we are committing genocide. It still wouldn't mean anything
whatsoever, even to the women and the children and their fucking pets.
So it's not the attacks on the personal facilities needed for survival, like healthcare and educational institutions.
Well, again, Israel has shipped in more humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip than literally any army.
This is just total Hasbara bullshit lies. If anything, we're being too kind to the Palestinians, because as we bomb them, we feed them. They've had an intentional policy of starvation. They literally announced starvation as a policy at one point. And that's why you see every day you get more deaths from starvation.
Smotrich did. They had a policy of starvation to pressure Hamas into a complete surrender in the beginning of 2025. This is beyond dispute.
Starvation. You had a lot of deaths from malnutrition, from starvation. You see the pictures coming out of these kids are like little.
That's also true.
Skinny little bags of bones. It's fucking horrific. And here's Ben Shapiro saying, if anything, we feed them too much. Oh my God.
A population.
Then I would pose to you why do any sort of Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? You can say what you want about how it's killed 1,000 people. It's poorly designed, and people have to go through war zones to reach it. But why would they even bother? They didn't have to. If they didn't care what happened in Gaza, they could just why would they send troops into Gaza? Why would members of government send their kids into Gaza? Many of them have been killed. If they could just sit back and let the airstrikes do all the work. Why do any of this? Why have any people in Gaza but the Gazans? If you're going to make that argument, it's silly. And Ben Shapiro's point here is completely valid. What they've done with aid is, on one hand, a disaster in the in because they have not worked hard enough to let enough in. But on the other hand, they have let aid in and have facilitated their own aid mechanism within Gaza. That definitely does more good than it does harm. But it does a lot of harm, right? Like it's pretty hard to lose the benefit downside ratio on an aid campaign. But why would they bother? It's definitely not some like Mossad op to kill people, because hundreds of millions of Palestinians have used the aid sites. If you count every single interaction and stack it on top of each other, and then only like 0.01 or 0.1% have died. I think maybe less than that. It's a horrible ratio. The UN's was a lot better, but why would they bother with that ratio when they could just do airstrikes?
It supports the enemy in literally all of human history. They've been shipping in about 4,400 calories per day per person.
Yeah, that's Israel's problem. They're just too kind. They're too altruistic. They love the Palestinians too much. You know, it's like they sent them home. Here, have the turkey, have the pizza, and we're going to send you an apple pie and a cheesecake. That's the problem. We gave them too much food, bro. That's the issue.
The Gaza Strip in the middle of a war in which the enemy is holding.
I don't know why Kyle's like this is a legitimate point. If the 4,400 calorie thing is complete garbage. That's not true by anyone's calculations. Maybe in February they did that. Or January, when they dumped a lot of aid there. That was like 5,000 calories per day per person. But during the blockade, it was not. It was nothing. It was 0. And then after the blockade, it's 1,000. It's still horrible.
Actual Israeli hostages underground who, as we've seen from some of the pictures, are actually starving. Again, none of this is to claim that the war...
So somehow, the hostages are starving, but the Palestinians are actually fat and happy. I love how Israelis were showing this picture of like...
I mean, that's his argument. I guess this guy doesn't even like argue against anything. He just like reacts to stuff. But
this starving hostage, and their big own was like, aha, see? And it's like, well, of course the hostage is starving, because everybody in fucking Palestine is starving, because you made it that way. It's also like, they did...
Like, you think Hamas would feed... They probably want them at that body weight. They probably have a specific calculation that... Hamas has no shortage of aid. They probably take in just enough to live off of. They don't have this big aid business that has kind of been like Israeli propaganda and has sold us on. It's probably not true. But they probably manufacture this guy to be as skinny as he can, while to pressure Israel's public to release the hostages. But also an alive hostage is worth more than a dead hostage. So
these mass bombing campaigns and killed some of their own hostages, and then went, oh, can you believe the hostages are dead under Hamas's control? Can you? You just fucking bomb them. Oh my God! Again, this is so designed. He knows he's lying. He knows he's full of shit.
Pretty or meticulous or anodyne, because it isn't. It's really, really, really ugly. But over the course of this war, about 3% of the Gazan population has been killed or wounded. If you're going to look at an actual genocide, obviously the prototypical case being the Holocaust, you're looking at 50% of the entire Jewish population in Europe destroyed. If you're looking at other...
It's only 3%. What's the big deal? By the way, again, that's not even true. As we discussed, there were 2 million to 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, and then now the actual death toll is about at least 300,000. That's according to a doctor who was in Gaza, but there's been reports that say it's at least 100,000. The official number of, I think it's at 62,000 now, is just completely and utterly outdated. And by the way, that...
It's possible. I mean, he's citing different reports than I thought he was going to cite. I don't know what calculations they did. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in the 6 figures, though. But who knows? Maybe the Hamas Health Ministry is accurate, as they have been in the past. And I think that's what the most likely scenario is.
What happens in genocides is in real time, the medical infrastructure can't keep up because they're under an existential threat and they've been bombed just like everybody else. They don't have the ability to do the data collection on a regular basis. So the Gaza Health Ministry number, which they smear as, oh, that's a Hamas number, that's actually a drastic undercount to what it really is. And in fact, Trump and Netanyahu admitted, oh, we got to get the rest of the people out of Gaza. That's like 1.7 million people or so. So if before it was 2.3 million and now it's 1.7 million,
I mean, that's horribly imprecise. That's just hearsay. It's stupid nothingness.
look at what they're saying. They're saying they killed hundreds of thousands of people there.
To genocides, say the genocides in Rwanda, you're talking about extraordinarily high percentages of the population that are wiped out. You certainly are not seeing procedures that require 4 layers of actual legal authority in order to do a drone strike. I've actually seen the tape of them doing this in Israel. They actually, if they spot from the air a terrorist who's going into a particular civilian area, you have to take like a full minute where the pilot on the drone calls up the legal authority, who then calls up the higher legal authority to get clearance for the actual drone strike, and they will call off the drone strike if they believe that the military target is too costly in terms of civilian casualties.
This is literally the worst lie I've ever heard in my life. This is actually the worst lie.
Do you have any experience here? I don't doubt that what Ben Shapiro is saying is completely true. The broader point is that their rules of engagement have loosened so much that they're operating at a 5-to-1 civilian militant ratio to fight a war that is utterly meaningless to any kind of lasting peace solution in this conflict as a whole. That's my problem with it. But you think that they just like send out these fighters to do whatever they want with no intel?
Okay, just a couple examples. The IDF dressed up like doctors, went into a hospital in Gaza and started shooting people. There's one example. Another example is they just
That's not true.
bombed a hospital.
Like, what are you talking about? That's a documented case of where there was militants they were targeting. That's stupid.
And this was recent. This was this month. They bombed a hospital. Then they bombed the first responders who were trying to save the lives of the people who they bombed in the hospital. So they did a double.
Again, oh my God, this is killing me. If what you're saying is true, then you have proven something that is incredibly hard to prove. Because what does bomb the first responders mean? How do we know that they targeted them? This is why the outcome is meaningless. You have to have intelligence. You have to have communications. That someone authorized at all those levels to bomb the hospital for the express intent of destroying the Gazans in whole or in part, and then proceeded to authorize bombing the first responders with the same level of intent. You'd have to prove that, and he can't prove that.
Killed the people in the hospital. I think it was journalists in this instance. Then they killed the people who were trying to save the lives of the journalists after the fact, the fucking like Red Cross workers. Those are just 2 examples. How about this one? You remember this? This was early on in the genocide, and it was reported that there's this refugee camp, and there were like 100 people in this building, and Israel leveled the building, and then Israel said, yeah, we killed those 100 people because we were trying to get one Hamas guy. I'm not kidding. In fact, even Wolf Blitzer was fucking
Yeah, that's a valid critique. I have no comment there. That's completely legitimate. That's the majority of my problem with their offensive in Gaza. Besides the overall purpose of it, which to me, I can't even put my finger on, but it's not anything productive. Nothing good will ever come of this military conflict.
astonished at what was being said. Here we go.
Back now to our breaking news here in the Middle East. A massive explosion at the largest refugee camp in Gaza. Joining us now is Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht. He's the international spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to ask you first about this massive blast that we all just saw. We saw the video at the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. Is there anything more you could first of all tell us about how this explosion happened?
Ali, I love you here.
I mean, it's easy to spot me on the court, I bet.
But you've always been like that. See me?
Yeah.
Before you hear me. All done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Not so fast. I love you.
Hi, well, thanks for having me. So we'll be coming out in the next, hopefully, hour with more data, but I can update you.
By the way, indigenous to the region, right, with that accent. This is definitely his home.
Now that there was a very senior Hamas commander in that area. Sadly, he was hiding, again, as they do, within civilians. And that's all I can say at this point. We're looking into it, and we'll be coming out with more data as we learn what happened there.
So can you confirm it was an Israeli attack that destroyed a big chunk of that Jabalia refugee camp?
Yes, I can. We were focused again on a target, a senior commander, Wolf, and we'll be updating you with more data.
How many people died in that attack? Was it? I mean, Kyle insinuated 100 or implied 100, but
as the hour moves ahead.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was. Killed many Israelis. We're doing everything we can. It's a very complicated battle space. There could be infrastructure there. There could be tunnels there. We're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know, we've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
Even Wolf Blitzer is fucking astonished. He's like, wait. But you killed 100 civilians to get one bad guy? You killed a lot of refugees.
Yeah, it's absurd. I want to see if there's any more Ben Shapiro clip right here.
The reason you hide behind civilians is because you know your enemy doesn't want to kill civilians. Right?
Yeah, that's Israel's issue. They're always avoiding those civilian casualties.
Believe that your enemy doesn't care about killing civilians, you wouldn't hide amongst.
If you look at Israel has dropped so many explosives on Gaza that if you add them all up, that's 8 nuclear bombs. If they were doing that without calculating some kind of proportionality, so many more people would have died. Imagine 120,000 tons of explosives, that many nuclear bombs, dropped like willy-nilly, no warning. I bet you 1 million plus people are dead. The fact that only 100,000 take 200,000 people are dead, I'll take Kyle's number because I haven't researched exactly where he got his inflated statistics from this time. It's still different. We know that they're having a process here.
Civilians, that wouldn't be a defense mechanism.
Okay, I like Charlemagne, but what's the point of having this guy on? For real, what's the point of having this guy on? If every word out of his mouth is going to be a grotesque lie, what is the point of having him on? And then also, I know Charlemagne disagrees with him, but like, if you're going to let him, give him the space to make these arguments, I mean, shit, you better drop the hammer on his ass.
Do you think Israel needs a regime change?
Israel's a democracy. They've had, I think, 5 elections in the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because, your commentary has added literally nothing. It's so imprecise. Ben Shapiro's commentary is actually precise. I think it's wrong morally, but at least it contains kernels of truth. And at least Charlemagne's being like genuinely interested in this. Like, you would never debate Ben Shapiro. You would, but if you did, it would be impossible to understand because you wouldn't engage with anything. You would just deny everything.
I believe will be election again in March. I do not think that Israel would be conducting this war very differently if there was somebody else in power. And I actually know every Israeli prime minister for the last 10 years, including the ones who are on the opposite side. People like Yair Lapid, who's on the opposite side, or Naftali Bennett, who's on the opposite side.
Two past prime ministers have condemned it, but whatever.
That last part is true. This idea of like, oh, if we just get rid of Netanyahu, then it'll all work out and they'll stop the genocide and everything. But no, literally anybody who...
No. There are prime ministers coming out saying that this is absurd and it's not going to... Omer and Barack. They've both said this. So we'll end it with that.